Hey guys, my name is Nomalanga Mhlauli-Moses with SuccessfulBlackWomen.com. I'm here with my good friend Shaquita Graham with TechOWeb.com. How are you doing today, Shaquita?
I'm doing great, Noma. How's it going?
Very good. This story that we're about to get into is actually, funny enough, the second time that we're talking about Nate Parker, where we talked about him not too long ago, and we were both so thrilled and so excited about this new movie that he was working on, and we were so happy that he was the writer and he was acting in it, and it was really telling an authentic and true story. So you can imagine our disappointment at the turn of events, where now Nate Parker is embroiled in a huge, I'm going to call it a scandal, because it's everywhere and it's going out of control. And it's a whole media buzz where he's now having charges that were dropped against him almost 20 years ago coming back and being discussed. And it's a mess. I know you have an article that you can share a little bit from.
Sure. So we were looking at The Birth of a Nation. Nate Parker's heralded film is now cloaked in controversy.
This is New York Times.
Yeah, the New York Times, was that yesterday, says that The Birth of the Nation had been positioned as a balm for an industry long criticized for sidelining minorities, and I'll add, not telling the truth of Black stories and Black history. Instead, the film has become clouded by the disclosure of tragic details in a nearly 2-decade-old case in which Mr. Parker was accused and later acquitted of raping a fellow student while at Penn State. All right. I will go on to say that the family says that basically they sounded, here it says, the woman's family sounded less convinced in a statement to New York Times on Tuesday, which read in part, "We are dubious of the underlying motivations that brought this to present light after 17 years. So they said they were less convinced about the fact that there may be some type of sabotage involved with bringing this to light after 17 years.
All right, so a few more facts, or at least a few more pieces of information that have been presented. The first thing is I caught a bit where it said that she had suffered from depression leading up to this event where she was allegedly raped. That's the first thing. The second thing is that she committed suicide. Do you know when? I think it was 2013 maybe, so about 3 years ago.
I think it was 4 years ago.
4 years ago. So recently, in more recent years, she committed suicide, which would be more than 10 years after the event. She committed suicide. The other thing is there was a witness who was, Nate Parker had an alleged co-conspirator, and there was a third person also in that house who said he saw the whole thing go down. And then the other key thing here is we have to emphasize that Nate Parker was acquitted, okay? So he was found not guilty of what he was accused of. And I think with all the media frenzy, it seems like people are forgetting that he was actually acquitted. So Shaquita, your reaction?
My reaction is cry me a river, Becky. Seriously. I don't know why we continue to follow the narratives of white supremacists, mainstream media. I think we need to stop getting all of our ideas and thoughts spoon-fed to us by the likes of the New York Times or other mainstream channels that have a history of crucifying Black people, even when they're acquitted. Whereas somebody like a George Zimmerman or a Darren Wilson, they went through the process. We have to let the court stand, whatever they said. Mike Brown, he didn't have his hands up because the DOJ said this. And come on, I don't even know why this is being brought up. Now all of a sudden, orgies are a new thing. It's very difficult to get acquitted, a Black man to get acquitted of anything. And if he got acquitted, like they tell us, if we want to take some feedback from suspected white supremacists, if you get acquitted, it's over. Okay, so that's number one for me.
Yeah, that was one thing that I was going to bring up is when you look at the justice system and its history with Black men, if he had even an iota of evidence against him that they could use to acquit him, to convict him, I believe that he would have been convicted. That's what I believe. You cannot look at the state of the justice system and how it has historically and presently treated Black men and just say, oh, they acquitted him because men always get acquitted. No, Black men don't always get acquitted, sometimes even when they didn't do it. Or when someone kills them, then that person gets acquitted. That's their story as it stands and their history as it stands with the justice system. So I'm in total agreement with you on that. To get a little more specific, I thought that I mentioned it in passing, but I thought it really required us to emphasize this. This woman, or at least at the time she was younger, they said that she has suffered a lot with depression. Even before this whole rape ever happened. So why can we not follow this story through and think about the fact that somebody who suffered with depression from a young age and probably continue to suffer with depression may at some point commit suicide? That's sometimes how it goes. That's the worst case scenario for a lot of people with a case of depression. Why can we not follow the story and say that this young girl who suffered from depression and we don't know what else, could have made bad decisions like getting drunk and going to a house full of young men who are willing to also be drunk and do whatever they do when they're drunk.
All the time.
And that's what I'm saying. So I'm not understanding why the only narrative that we're hearing is, oh my goodness, look at them, they raped her, they got away with it, and now look, she killed herself because they raped her. And I don't think that there's necessarily, those are the dots that you could automatically put together. There's some other ways that you could arrive at she killed herself, as in she had a history of instability. And it's not about attacking the victim, because at this point she's not really a victim, because she is somebody who said she was raped and then it was found that the courts found that she wasn't. Does it happen that sometimes women get raped and then the men are acquitted? Yes, that does happen. But what also does happen is that women say that they're raped and they weren't raped, and men get convicted.
And white women have a long history of saying that Black men raped them.
Right.
Can it not be true?
Right. So there's a lot of things going on here. And then we also have to look at the timing of this, which you kind of alluded to, and you said the family of the girl was like, the timing here is suspect, because why now, 17 years later? The timeline seems to be a bit fuzzy. I'm inclined to believe that, based on what I've seen in the stories, that this incident happened in 1999. So that would be 17 years ago. They were on trial in 2001 and acquitted in 2001, so it's 14 years ago. But between 14 and 17 years ago, there was all that time. He's been in a number of movies. He's been a prominent figure in Hollywood, and this didn't come up. This didn't become an issue. And now, when he's on the cusp of a big explosion of doing something so meaningful, in terms of telling a Black story, a powerful story, because we see a lot of these slave stories where the slave is this whimpering mess of a man who can't do anything and is helpless and so forth. But he's telling another story where the slaves are actually pushing back against their oppression. They're being seen as heroes. They're being seen as victors. They're being seen as powerful. And then this story gets shut down and is suddenly all caught up in a controversial story from 17 years ago. That, for me, is hard to swallow. Why now? I have to ask that question, why now?
Listen, people who are caught up in this narrative, I question if you understand white supremacy. And if you don't, please refer to Mr. Neely Fuller and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing to just get the basics, because I just don't give any credibility to any of this so-called controversy. I'm still proud of Nate Parker, the business content, the movie content, the business acumen, all of that. If there's anything that I would say about Nate Parker is that as Black people, whether we're following media narratives or whether we are someone like Nate Parker in business, we have to continue to struggle to replace white supremacy. And one thing we need to remember is that to counter white supremacist agendas, we can't fall for things like the interracial con game, or for giving ownership of intellectual property to suspected white supremacists. We should be trying to steer clear of those things, because Nate Parker did have an opportunity to sell this film to Byron Allen, a Black man in the industry, that he declined for whatever reason. And again, I'm not trying to point a bunch of fingers at him. He's releasing a film like many people do. He's in Hollywood. There's so many scandals in Hollywood. I don't ever hear a bunch of things about, like, for instance, the producer of The Hunger Games, his son shot 6 people in a rampage in Hollywood. That didn't affect his film. You know, even though he wasn't the one who did it, a lot of times the media will point back to Black people and their parenting skills and all of these kinds of things. Right. So I am just not buying into it. And again, you know, I applaud the man for his amazing work now and in the past. He's definitely talented. He is a part of this record-breaking business deal. He's a remarkable talent. And so I'm not going to focus on the narrative that somebody's trying to spoon feed me. I am in total opposition to that. And, you know, that's really how I feel about it.
One more point to bring up is that, which was mentioned in that article that you're dismissing. The movie focuses on white men raping Black women, because that was a common occurrence during slavery. So ironically, there's an outrage here about a crime, or an alleged crime for which he was acquitted, but silence when it comes to the outrage that we should be having for the fact that this movie is going to reveal a lot of ugly things that happened. And we are inclined to think that those things have stopped happening, but they haven't stopped happening. They just have taken a different form. And the form that they take somehow makes them more acceptable or less noticeable to people. But the movie's going to show that it was common for these white slave owners to rape Black women. And if you don't believe that, look around. Every time we see these shows about people who say that they're Black, there's always traces of white DNA in their blood. And it's not because they had interracial relationships, it's because their ancestors were Black women who were raped by white slave owners.
So again, when you understand systematic white supremacy, you will know that the language of white supremacy is lies. So you want to exaggerate something that happened with Nate Parker that he was acquitted for, but then you want to brush over something that happened commonly then and today. The DOJ just released a report about Baltimore Police Department and their sexual activity, their illegal, sick, heinous sexual activity with victims, coercing Black women to have sex and different things like that, getting away with it, not reporting it, not investigating it. So all the people who are standing behind this media narrative against Nate Parker, I would say you need to shift your focus and focus on things like what's happening with the Baltimore Police Department. And we're constantly facing the danger of race soldiers infiltrating the police department, as the FBI mentioned. I mean, these things about people in Hollywood and what they're doing in movies, this is, it's silly for them to bring this up at a time with such a pivotal film and people buy into it. The bottom line is, I'm going to stay on my square when it comes to Black men and Black people in general. I'm never, ever going to side with suspected white supremacists to try to sabotage them, and that includes Nate Parker. I applaud Nate Parker for his business position. you know, I already talked about the things that, you know, I would, if I had to point a finger, I would point a finger at, and that's all I have to say about it. I think he's awesome.
All right, and on that note, we can end right there. My beautiful and passionate friend, Shaquita Graham, you can find her at techoweb.com. And I, of course, can be found at successfulblackwoman.com. Thank you guys for watching, and thank you, Shaquita, for a great segment.
Thanks, Noma. Thanks, guys, for watching.